As promised, just a very quick, I said that the last one was meant to be quick and went for 7 minutes, talk about the situation of human rights. Now this comprises the second part of your homework, your assessment essay. The third part being an Indigenous rights issue, but I'll not be uploading anything about that for the moment. I'll give you some information in class. Like I said, the second part is human rights. So remember, United Nations create this charter, right, which looks at every, 30 articles, I think it was, of the rights which every single person in every single country is supposed to have. It's supposed to be a way of controlling these rights, of enforcing these rights, but there's not. It's a great and noble and good and lofty and idealistic gesture, but the United Nations does not make laws which overrule or override the laws of individual countries. So if a country doesn't want to respect human rights, or a country disagrees with them, fair go, that's their right to disagree. So where it says, no cruel and unnecessary punishments or torture, we have torture, we have executions, we have capital punishment in a whole bunch of countries, ignoring what the United Nations says. So Russia, USA, two prime countries, members of the Permanent Council of the UN, the Big Five, two of them both flouting, contravening, not upholding core and fundamental principles of human rights according to the UN. The UN doesn't have an army, right? It relies on member states putting soldiers together into a force whenever conflict is arising. But remember, we said of Rwanda, those forces of the United Nations are peacekeepers. They don't go in to sort things out. They've got to be seen as an umpire, a referee, impartial. They can't be white people telling black people how to do things. They can't be black people telling white people how to do things. The idea is that the forces should, the UN forces should be impartial and respectful, but world crises don't need impartiality and respectfulness. They need decisive action. So a lot of people have said over the past 60, 70 years, whatever the UN's been around since 48, 47, a lot of people have questioned whether the United Nations is actually worth anything that it stands for. However, that said, they talk and they discuss and they put things into action. They have commissions for refugees, they have commissions for children, they protect and uphold the rights, they have commissions for education. All of those things which are human rights, they help people's rights in different countries. You'll all have heard, I hope, of Malala, who was shot in Afghanistan by the Taliban. Now, she is being celebrated by the United Nations for the work that she's done in supporting girls getting an education. She survived this attack and has shown great bravery and courage. So the UN have supported her ideas and her ideals, and hopefully girls in countries where girls' education hasn't been a priority in the past, it will be a priority in the future, and it is a priority in the future. They uphold the rights of refugees and they support the idea of refugees, because every person has a right to a life in a safe country. So remember, refugees don't leave their country generally because they want to. They leave their country because they have to. They don't feel they can get jobs. They don't feel they can worship it freely. They don't feel they can get justice. They don't feel like they can be represented politically because maybe they live in a dictatorship, or maybe they live in a police state and there's lots of torture. So they want to leave their country. Remember, leaving your country, it's the last action. It's not something you do first and foremost. It's not a holiday. It's a massive, massive life change. They step into countries and they don't know how they're going to be received. But the UN helps them. It sets up camps, it sets up support networks, it offers education and language and all that kind of thing, so these people can help to integrate into their new lands and their new countries. So that's another job of the United Nations, alongside the UN, and I meant to say this a little bit earlier at the start, is the role of the non-government organisation. I'll refer to them in class frequently as the NGO. Now, organisations like Amnesty, they are there to kind of monitor and to police both the UN but national governments as well. So they will look out to see if people are being tortured, or to see if there's an excessive amount of child labour and kids being forced into doing very, very low-paid menial jobs when they should be in education. So Amnesty keeps a check on this. So, for example, we've talked about Saudi and Chop Chop Square, where folks are just literally bundled out of vans and have their heads chopped off by the religious police in Saudi Arabia. And Amnesty will report this when maybe Saudi Arabia doesn't want this to be reported. They may be trying to hush things up, but then maybe they're not. They execute people in public. It sends out a message, but it's a cruel and horrific form of punishment. The UN stand against those things. Amnesty stands against those things and shouts about it. The UN stands against those things and maybe talks quietly about it. So non-government organisations are really, really important, and the word I want to use here is that they lobby governments, they lobby international communities, national governments as well. They lobby for support, they lobby for recognition, they lobby for the rights of the people that they represent and the people that who are often silenced because of the situation that they're in. So non-government organisations is another really, really important aspect of how human rights works. If you like, the Amnesty is for people like maybe Greenpeace is for the planet. So the planet and the animals obviously can't advocate for themselves, so they have Greenpeace to advocate for them through science. Whereas Amnesty, they advocate and lobby for people who are silenced, who are oppressed, and they try to get these people a fair go, a better life, a life in a country where they will be treated with a bit more respect and dignity, as the United Nations Charter says they should be treated. So that's my summary on human rights. This coming week, what we want you to do as well as your work studies is research in particular detail a human rights abuse that is of interest to you. So it could be child labour, it could be forced marriage, it could be lack of education for girls, it could be sex trafficking of young people into countries where they don't live. It could be the refugee crisis that we've seen over the last few years. It could be public execution or humiliating forms of torture or treatment from people. There's any number of things that you'll get a chance to have a quick look at. 2, 3, 4 minute clips, way shorter than this, thank God, girls. But it will give you a real heads up and indication of what you need for that second part of your essay, because it's all about knowledge and then how you apply that knowledge with those cognitive verbs that we talk about. All right, so that's the cheery stuff coming up: genocide, human rights. The last one, and like I said, I'm not doing it now, is your paragraph section on Indigenous Australians and their battle for civil rights from 1967, when they become part of this country, part of the referendum, after the referendum, part of the census, and they're given technically equality, but that's another issue for another day, for perhaps a local to explain a little bit more about, because they're an expert rather than me. Girls, all right, I'll see you in class. Bye.